everybody. Welcome to episode 1, Social, of Demolay and Dad, where I'm Alex, the Demolay part of Demolay and Dad, and he's the dad part of Demolay and Dad.
Hi.
In today's video, we're just going to discuss what it means to us when it comes to like social interactions and different ways that can be experienced.
So, thanks. I'm excited for this.
Me too, it's our first one.
Yeah, I know. So I think the first thing to decide is I'm interested to see what social means to you. So, like, what does it mean to be social to you?
So I've been thinking about that a lot since the first announcement. Social to me is just kind of like an interaction that between two basically humans. Like it could be anything else, but in this context, it's just like if you impact another human being, it's an interaction, which is why it's called a social interaction. It's just being with another human being.
And I think that's going to be the part where, like, for me, like, social is face to face interaction. So, like, do you feel like it needs to be like an in-person interaction to be considered social?
See, in this, at least in my generation, I think that you can have really good discussions virtually. So, to me, that's still being social because you're still interacting with another person, you're still talking to them, you're still giving them your emotions and stuff like that. So in this, like, at least when I grew up, being if I'm on a call with someone, it's still being social to me.
Okay. Yeah, so for me, being social is more of face to face. So, like, when I was younger and I got an opportunity with my friends, somebody was having like a birthday party, or you were having like a get together at the school or something like that. It was a really big deal because, like, that was to us being social. So, like, when you could have friends over after school or on the weekends or something like that, it was a really big deal because, like, that was being social. And I think sometimes, like, me personally, I kind of struggle with, I guess, understanding. I talk to like you and other people, and it seems like people are a lot less excited about actually hanging out with friends. Um, but I think that's the big part of it. Like, to me, I didn't get to hang out with my friends unless it was in person. Like, I know you had a friend that like moved to a different, and they're still around, but they moved to a different school and everything like that, and it really didn't seem to impact you. Like, you seemed pretty okay with it.
Well, for me, and for at least what I've talked to my friends about, it's social to me it can still happen online, like I said for me. So it's special for another reason when another person comes over and like we talk in person. It's special for another reason than what you're talking about, but same premise. It doesn't happen very often because by your definition, we're always just talking on the phone, which is not being social. So the reason I think because you could be social without uh going up to someone and saying hey to me. Like if you were put in isolation and you had a phone and you could call your friends, to me that's still being social because you still have human interaction. And if you didn't have that phone, I'd still feel like that you don't say it.
Do you feel like that hurts the next generation coming up, though? Like, for me, you had to learn. We were put in so many situations to where, like, every situation was a social situation. Like, every time we went to a school dance, or we went to, like I said, like, friends' birthday parties and stuff like that. You kind of had to learn how to introduce yourself, how to, talk to people that you weren't comfortable, that you didn't know, and that kind of thing, outside of your comfort zone. Do you feel like this, I guess, the newer version and the consideration of, like, with social media and then, like, online and everything like that, do you feel like that is a detriment to the new, to the newer generations coming up?
That's a really great thought. Um, I've read a lot of studies about that and people saying that it won't affect them as much as it should, ironically, because you'd always expect them to say, this is going to hurt our people. And I feel it will. Um, there's already been like stuff about people just doing stuff online that they can't really do in person. And that's a benefit because you can't like this is gonna be like really like convenient for some people, but like you can't do a voice changer in real life. But like you also can't high five someone online. I mean, you could do like a virtual
I
Teams
was
high
getting ready to
five.
say, like, don't they have like emojis now of like the
Yeah, you could do that, but it's not the same, you know?
It's really not. I don't know. It kind of reminds me. I know it was a few months back. I found like this old school like rotary telephone, and I was like, "Come here. I want you to take this phone, and I want you to slam it down as hard as you can." And I'm like, "Doesn't it just feel different than like trying to hang up with somebody like this, like hitting a button?" And I kind of feel like I don't know. To me, I think there's pros and cons. I think that we live in a more social, when I say social, we live in a more connected world today. Like it actually, it makes, as a parent, it makes me happy that like when your friend moved away, like when I was a kid, like that was devastating because that just meant you lost like your friend moved away. You might write some letters every now and then, but realistically, I think still have one friend from my childhood that we kept in touch, but it was an effort. Like we worked to keep in touch. Um, like it makes me happy that like you don't have to experience that. Like your friend changed schools and you're still able, to hang out and stuff like that. And that makes me happy. But I don't know, the biggest thing that I see is I do see, I don't know if this is an exaggeration, but I see the death of small talk. There's an art to that, like, hey, how's it going? How you been? You know what I mean? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Um, that brings me to another one of my questions I've on my mind. Um, there's been an uproar of people saying because it was a different meeting a little while ago. People kept saying, I'm an introvert. I have social anxiety. And I don't, I want to hear your opinion on that because there's a very loose connotation to that now, to where people keep saying, I'm an introvert. I like to stay inside. But then you go see them at school and they're all over the place. They're having five friends on them every single day. Like, I just feel like it has a different meaning.
I think there's a lot of, I mean, we're just gonna skip straight into like asking like difficult questions here. I don't want to call people out, but I do think there are certain things that have become buzzwords, um, that I've noticed anyway. Like people claiming, for some reason, it's almost cool to be awkward. I mean, like people claiming to have, to be I'm an introvert, and so that's for the it took me a really long time to actually know what introvert really meant, and all it doesn't mean that you don't like being social. All it means is where you get and expend energy. So like a person that's introverted, it takes energy for them to be social. So whereas a person that's extroverted, they get energy, for them to be social. But no, I do feel like the conversation, like I said, I think it's, in some respects, I hate that people start using, like, I have social anxiety and stuff like that because, like, it downgrades, making it so commonplace kind of, it talks against people who actually have it. I mean, issues with anxiety. I mean, social anxiety is a real thing. And there's a lot of people who really do struggle with it. But there's a difference in being nervous and stuff like that and having social anxiety. And
I also think that brings up like the difference between nervous and anxious. People say, "Oh, I'm anxious to give this presentation," but really, it's just I'm pretty nervous to put this.
exactly. And I don't know. I've in some respects the information overflow that we have, um, it's brought a lot of things, and it's good in a lot of respects. Like, I was just talking to and my wife about it, and I was like, when I was younger, like I came from a really small town, and they didn't understand what dyslexia was, and they didn't understand anything about like learning disabilities and everything. And so like when you didn't get a good grade on something, it was just like work harder. That was what you did. And now it's a lot more commonplace for someone to understand, for teachers and counselors and stuff like that to understand, like, oh, he's actually got a challenge, or, she has to work through something. And, but people use actual social disorders now as an excuse to some degree.
Yeah, when people say, again, I don't want to call anybody out because it's kind of rude, but there are some people who go, I have ADHD. And so they could get like some sort of like validation for something wrong they did.
Well, and it's, again, I think there's, I don't know. I mean, because like in some respects, you kind of want to say like, oh, well, this is new because like people didn't have all these issues, 10, 20, 30 years ago. Now, part of that is because people didn't know they existed and they didn't test for things. And like I said, I'm dyslexic, and so well, like I said, when I was younger and you got a bad grade on something, it was like, well, work harder, and and it was really discouraging. But do am I a twitchy person, and do I like to like bounce my leg, and do I like to sit still for long periods of time? No, I don't. Can I do it? Yes, I can. And I think that's where the distinction is I think there's people have a harder time drawing that line between can't and don't wanna. Like, I don't like to sit still for 3 or 4 hour work meeting or presentation or something that I've got going, but I think there are legitimately people who have disorders that prevent them from being able to do things. And to me, kind of like what you're talking about, like people who go like, I'm anxious, I have, social anxiety. It's like, no, you're just nervous, man. Like, there are people in the grips of like certain things that, you know, they can't do things. And I wish we would be less apt to, blame stuff on these disorders and stuff like that. And it's like, instead of like using it as an opportunity to grow, like, of course, if you don't get out in front of 20 people very often, of course you're nervous. People who do it all the time get nervous.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
I am in my school. It's very commonplace for someone to like. I had this kid in my class in sixth grade, and he was a really challenged person, like mentally, and I was very like concerned for him. So I was like, "Are you okay?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then he got some help. He got a therapist, everything, and then he was cool for the entire summer, as far as I know, because I texted him a lot because he was like my friend. Come seventh grade, and then he did the exact same thing, and I did. I don't want to because I don't know. And that's kind of the thing where like people in the uproar of anxiety and ADHD cases. Again, I don't know if it's because more are diagnosed or more are I
I
have
mean, it's hard. And
ADHD.
when you're dealing with stuff like that, it's like trying to talk to someone about anxiety. It's like, you don't know. Because I mean, I'm not a medical doctor. I don't feel qualified to look at someone and be like, you're faking it. So you kind of have to take stuff like that at face value. But I think that to some degree, I think the influx of, like, I know people that still today, I mean, I know people that are adults today and they get the bulk of their social interaction through online gaming and, message boards and stuff like that, and they really enjoy talking with people, but they enjoy doing it online. And that's where I ask the questions like, do you feel like the younger generations are being detrimented because like like I said, when I was growing up, you were kind of put in a position where you had to do it. And so, like, the more, it's like everything else. The more you do something, the more comfortable you get with it. So I get concerned about, it being kind of like a cyclical effect. You know what I mean? Like, oh, well, this makes me uncomfortable, so I choose not to do it. Well, the less I do it, the more uncomfortable I get, so I do it less,
Yeah.
and I worry about, I've talked to some of the kids, and, I'm like, it's stuff like job interviews that's a skill. I know a lot of people that, through my career, I'm one of them. I mean, on paper, I don't look as impressive as someone with like a master's degree and stuff like that. But typically speaking, if I can make it to an interview, I can talk to people well enough that they'll be like, oh, yeah, this guy would be pretty good for the job. I kind of worry that people who, kind of latch on to this like social interaction of nothing but online, I kind of worry that they're going to be detrimented when they try to enter, the workforce. And
Yeah, I feel like that's a double-edged sword because during COVID, there was an uproar of online activity because we had to stay in quarantine. So when online gaming took a big surge, it allowed a lot of people in quarantine to talk to their friends. However, when more generations come and then there's more like technology breakthroughs, and then at some point there's just gonna be some robots walking around.
how are your robots walking away? Didn't you see the Tesla thing
Yeah,
that just came
I've seen that, but there's parkour robots now. Like there's so much stuff going on.
Why would you have a parkour robot? Are people like remote controlling the parkour robot?
No, it's automated. They just start jumping around on those little
So,
things.
okay, so that brings me. I mean, I think it's hilarious because it's like I think of a time when I told you that you couldn't play video games, but you could watch YouTube, and so the response was, "I'm going to watch YouTube videos of someone else playing video
There's a paradox
games."
that happens.
So it's like, okay, I'm going to create a parkour robot. I'm not going to do parkour. I'm going to watch the robot do parkour,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It's just weird to me, and I think that it's a struggle, and we sit. You have one. There's this weird in between because, like, I admit I waited a long time to have kids, and so like I'm Generation X. I do remember a time before the internet. I have actually used a phone book to try to find a job.
I feel like it was like 19.
Oh, you hush yourself. So, I mean, I grew up at that, so I remember that. But also, I mean, I do IT for a living, so I'm a very techie person. I'm very well versed, but even I don't like online shopping. I'd rather go buy something in person so I can touch it and like I don't have to wait for it to get shipped to me. Like I went, I bought it, I walked home with whatever it was I bought. I got the exact one that I wanted.
Yeah. I just feel like social interactions nowadays are more exaggerated because I don't want to say because I don't mind school. Like I know people are like, oh, I hate to go to school. Like I don't mind school. Like I go there if I have to. I love presentations now because I've just gotten used to them. Um, Now, am I an introvert? Do I get energy from it, or do I lose energy from it? I definitely lose energy from doing a presentation or going to school because I come home one day I'm like, oh, man, I'm tired, and then but I'm not. I'm surrounded just by people because I love talking to people. But that doesn't mean that I'm isolated when I say I'm introverted.
Yeah, and I think that's a big differentiation that people need to make. Um, I think there's something to be lost to some degree. Um, Interacting with my friends used to be such a special occasion. Yeah, I mean, like, I mean, I remember a time before call waiting. So, if your friend or, someone that you were interested in dating was going to be calling, I remember going around telling everyone in my house I couldn't use the phone. So and so's calling me at 6. You can't use the phone at 6. And I mean when that person called, you were excited. It didn't matter if it was your best friend, or what it was. It was just you were excited. Like I get to talk to someone, and now it's so commonplace to be so connected that I worry that we take our social interactions for granted. When we have opportunities to do things in a group setting and stuff like that, it's eh.
Yeah. Um, I think, like I said, it's a special for a different reason to us because when my friend calls and they're like, "Hey, do you want to play a game together?" I say I'm busy. When really all I'm gonna do is go rot in my bed or something like that. And I feel like that's the reason it's special because when people say, "Yeah, I'm not busy, come over," then it's like actually like, "Oh, really?" Because it's kind of a different reality now because I don't know if it's because there's more things to do now or there's a different connotation on social because a lot more people say they're introverted. So when I say, "Hey, do you want to come over?" they're like, "Man, I'm busy." And then they just go play a game or something like that.
No, that's fair. And I think it's kind of like you said earlier. It's pros and cons. Um, I don't want to say one way is better than the other. It's interesting hearing your point of view. You know, I try really hard to make sure I understand, like I'm listening and I understand the whys. I don't want to ever, like I said, when I was younger, it was like you kind of, this is the way it is, period, end of story. Um, and I think that's why conversations like this, I think conversations are really what we're missing across the board. I think if more people had conversations, there would be less arguments.
Yeah,
There's a
absolutely.
difference. We don't have to agree. I personally think there's value in face to face interactions. I know people disagree with that, and I have people I work with. Like I said, I work in IT, and they we're in a mixed workforce to where you have to be on site so many days a week, and you can work remotely from home so many days a week and stuff like that. And I'm an advocate for doing stuff in the office and like actually booking a meeting room, and let's plan it on a day, because we have certain days of the week where everyone's supposed to be in the office. So I'm like, let's plan these meetings on this day and actually book a meeting room so we can all be in the same spot together. And people, I've got other people that work on my team, and they're like, this is pointless, I can get more done at home. And so even in the professional world today, you've got a difference of opinion of whether the value of like face to face social interaction, much less the difference between your generation and my generation.
Yeah.
But I think
Um,
it's important to have these conversations to try to understand each other's viewpoint.
yeah, I think I like that like reward example. I gotta be honest with you, hot take here. It's a little selfish because I find very much merit in face to face, you know? Like if I'm talking to someone I feel better, I can understand their facial expressions, what they're interested in actually not interested in. Um so when someone at your work says this is pointless, we could do something at home, I agree. You could do so much for yourself at home. If you're at home, you could do stuff at your home and then work. But when you're at work, you could do so much more for your work when you're at work. So it also depends on your placement in the social interaction. Because if you're walking down the street and then you talk to somebody, like that's a lot more merit than like I don't know, you're in like a Call of Duty lobby and you
Well, I mean, that comes down to the small talk, like we're talking about. You know what I mean? Like, small talk is an art. I've had really cool ideas and brainstorming sessions at the coffee machine with someone. I have several people that I work with that we're not on the same team. Um, we're not even in the same department, but we have really great working relationships because we run into each other all the time in the coffee machines and at the snack machine, and we chit chat, And so when there's been times when like I've needed a favor from someone in a different department, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to reach out to so and so because we have a great working relationship. Never even been in a meeting together.
Yeah,
But
that's why lunch is so important at school, because at lunch, that's when I get to talk to my friends about it. Because like in an actual classroom, the teachers are like, "You can't talk. We're learning right now." And then I go to and then we're like in the in betweens, and like you could talk like in the hallway or something, but then like you get 5 minutes.
well, that's the thing is like they always talk about school. School is for so much more than academics. Like you do learn again social interaction. You learn how to talk to people from different places because that's one of the hardest things to remember is not everyone is from the same place as you. Not everyone is in the same place as you. Like people you have to it's a learned skill to deal with people who are in a different place than you are mentally and emotionally, you know, it truly is a skill. And I think that's where a lot of the conversation that we should be having, you know, you know, what's the old saying, like you don't talk about politics and religion at the dinner table.
Yeah,
And that was a horrible decision because it's better to learn how to disagree with someone than just ignore the fact that we have disagreements. That's where a lot of the issues that we hear about and we deal with today come from.
yeah.
And I
I
think that's a big social aspect of being like the social aspect, like being able to go to places and be in a room with people that you don't necessarily agree with on things, but you have a common goal.
yeah. Um, I really find that ironic that people don't like talking about politics or religion at the dinner table. I think it's a good idea. I get the premise. You don't want to fight when in your social interaction at the dinner table. However, politics is about the socialness of it. You're trying to talk to people.
Politics aren't about the social. There's a phrase of politicking, and there is definitely a social aspect of politics, but like I want to that's a whole other conversation. I mean, that should be an episode all to itself. Like today's word of the day is politics. If you don't want to talk about politics, don't watch this video. But I mean, I think the important part there from the social perspective is, like I said, it's learning how to exist with other people that you don't agree with, and being able to go, you know what, we don't agree, and that's okay.
Yeah,
And I don't think that people do that very well. I'm not saying I always do it very well. There's more than once that I get into a conversation, then I have to come back and like, dude, I'm sorry, I, like,
yeah.
because you're in the heat of the conversation. But
Let me ask you a really encompassing question. So we've been talking a lot about like humanity here. Do you think social interactions can happen between non-humans, non-Homo sapiens?
I mean, are you talking like,
Say like a dog.
yeah? I mean, that's a proven fact that dogs are social creatures. That's why they travel in packs. I mean, it depends on in human beings are, I mean, we're animals, essentially. So, I mean, like, we're social creatures. Just like dogs travel in packs or social, they seek out other dogs.
We used to be nomads.
Do what?
Nomads travel from place to place with a
Yeah,
group.
I mean, that's a really interesting historical thing to look into, like animalism and like life 10,000 years ago. I
Yeah,
mean, but I mean, but then you've got, you do have lots of creatures in this world that are, you know, uh, I, I guess independent. I don't know every species there is, but I mean, I'm a dog person. It's I mean, we have a bunch of them, uh, but I mean, it's the same thing. Like people are social creatures, and I think it is kind of built into our DNA. And I think things like online interaction, I think we have a desire not to do things that make us uncomfortable. The problem is you can't grow without being uncomfortable. So I think things like are the influx of online interactions is like a whole bunch, people who want to do stuff that they don't want to be awkward and learn this new skill and get out of their comfort zone by going out in the public and doing all this other stuff, but they still have, that need for social interaction. And so that's where, the influx of online interactions come from.
Yeah. Let me ask you another question that just came up to my mind. So we've been talking a lot about like the online interaction that like my generation has been going through, like gaming and stuff like that, just on the phone talking. What if you had a friend over or you went to another friend's house? What activities would you guys do?
So that's a horrible question to ask me because I am somewhat socially awkward. Typically speaking, talking about politics and religion, I am a conversationalist. I used to, a long time ago when I was younger, I did enjoy dancing, and so I would go to house parties and a lot of music, and people would, just hang out and stuff like that. I prefer smaller groups now, so that we can have conversation. I enjoy talking about politics and religion, and I enjoy talking about almost, anything that's controversial because I like hearing other people's points of view.
Yeah.
um, Let me ask you. You keep asking me questions. So, do like if something happened, and let's say that there was no online interaction for like the next 12 months or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the younger generation would adapt well to being, if put in a position? Because here's the other thing: is it's not just social. What about alone time? What about the other side of it? So, like, I was excited when I got to see my friends, but that was because I spent so much time alone. Because if your friends didn't come over, you couldn't socialize with them until you had like these special events, right? So, how do you feel like the generation would your like your age range would do with that alone time? Like, how do you feel like that would affect you?
So if internet connection just cut out right now, no social interaction, that would detriment the generation right now. Because like a lot of the stuff that people are talking about now is how is this gaming industry gonna come back from this major fail? And it's no longer if that cut off, then I feel like the younger generation from like ages 0 to like 10, they would be detrimented, dude. Like it wouldn't even be funny. It would be
Well,
like
like I said, I mean, because that's the other side of it is like, yeah, you got the social aspect, but then you've got like oh, well, what do you do when you're not being social?
yeah, like alone time right now. A lot of people like alone time. A lot of young people, as far as I know. I might just make fun with a lot of awkward people, but a lot of people are like, "Man, I'm gonna do this when I get home," and almost everything they list is just like, "I'm gonna draw." Like you can draw in front of a live audience or with someone, but it's very like
There's certain things like reading, art.
yeah,
I was always in, I don't know, I was always an advocate because of, I guess the time, place, but I always had sports that I could do alone. So like I was big on hacky sack, skateboarding, inlining, stunt biking, like things that you didn't need a whole bunch of other people to do it.
yeah. I feel like events like that, like sporting events. Speaking of sports, my bad. Uh, like events like those, or just like music festivals or something like that, really brings people of today together. Because like if you
Well, it's
go,
kind of funny because like that's the thing that always brought, especially music. I think that's kind of a universal language.
yeah,
Like,
music for me. Like I went to like my first like a big concert a little while ago, and it was like there were just people like screaming at each other, but it was like they were singing the song lyrics to each other, like because it was an angry song, but like they weren't singing it at each other. They were singing it with
you're
each other.
commiserating,
Yeah, and it was
you're
like it was really eye opening. It was really cool to see because again they're like flashing lights and everything, but I really like to see like the social interactions, like the yippee, like people just automatically knew when he sent out a signal to turn on like a flashlight or something. It was really cool.
no.
Yeah,
I do think that these conversations are important, but I am also very comfortable with, I guess, that's why I find these conversations interesting, is because like I know I don't know everything that's happening, that's happening present day, in the sense of like there's so many things. I listened to music when I was a teenager, and I used to think that like my mom and dad just aren't, they just don't understand the music. And then I listen to the same songs today, and I'm like, wow, this music really does suck. Like my parents weren't wrong. I was just like, I loved it because they hated it. And, it's just the way memory
Yeah,
plays a
because
trick on
part of
you.
like a social interaction is like communication. Because people always talk about like love languages. Like for like my mom, it's like their love language is acting. Like if I do something for her, she's like, "Oh, that's cool." But it would be a lot more like you said a little while ago. If I got her a rose, it would mean a lot less if I like did the dishes.
Well, no, and that's, and again, that comes part of the social interaction. It's learning the nuance of how to communicate with people who aren't you. Um, I'm a very fast-paced individual, and so I have a habit of interrupting people because, like, okay, let's keep this conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I get, there's so many different aspects to, when you start talking about social interaction, it's like, what are you talking about? Are you talking about the conversation? Are you talking about the reading a body language? Are you talking about? That's why I don't know. I always hate text message because like there's no tone or inflection. And was it Keenan Peele maybe that did
Kid.
like like a video, and it's kind of funny because you got one guy that's like, oh, you're priceless, and he's like the sends the text, and the other guy's reading the text like, what, I'm priceless, and he gets offended by it because he's reading it differently than how it was sent.
Yeah,
And,
without price rather than can't have a price on it.
yeah, and it's like I'm just that's one of the reasons I really don't like text messages, because
Text messages really scare me because, like, I mean, I was raised by you, so I have a lot of these opinions. So, like, when I get a message, it's like a new holy grail for me because, like, I go on it and it says, get down here. And rather than, like, get down here, like, I don't know. But, like, unless they said, like, emoticons for me, really help me. Like, if someone says,
the
like,
hieroglyphics of the modern age. I
yeah,
mean,
people are going to look back on today and, like, Egyptians, and then they're going to be like, emojis. And they're like,
no,
trying to
they're not going to
decipher
look
it.
back on today, because like Egyptians carve their stuff in stone. We carve our stuff in text messages,
You know, Reddit.
and they're just not going to exist. There's going to be this big gap in
The Dark
the,
Ages.
yeah, like you fast forward like 10,000 years from now, and there's just not going to be anything like when archaeologists of 10,000 in 10,000 years go to dig us
Is that
up.
like called like existentialism? Like the thought that like in like a few hundred years you'll just be completely forgotten.
I think that's part of that. That's also nihilism.
How can we like because so when people say in 500 years no one's gonna remember you,
I'm
then
like,
I'm gonna do
cool.
like
That
that.
means that's a. Do you know how much stress that takes off of me?
Yeah,
And now I do think it's important when we're talking, since we talk about all this. I mean, it's important to bring it back to. It is important to remember that your social interaction and what you say and do does have a direct impact on other people.
absolutely.
So
That's where we
just
get to
because you're
like be
having a bad
kind.
day doesn't give you the right to ruin everybody else's bad day.
That's been a real issue because like when I come home and I'm like tired, I don't mean to come off like grr, I've had a bad day. You should like. It's more like, man, I've had a bad day. Can I like not or do something like that or like? But it comes off as like I'm trying to make an excuse to avoid a problem, and I find that hard, but I understand why that can be mistaken because I know a lot of people who come home and they just like, I've had a bad day. You're gonna have a bad day.
Well, I think it's give and take. I mean, there are times when you've had a bad day and you are taking time for yourself to recover from your bad day. But you have to also understand that sometimes you don't get that luxury. And sometimes you've had a bad day, but you can't take time because you need to give time. So, like, other people have also potentially had a bad day, and maybe someone else needs you to do something for them, and you kind of have to put your bad day on hold so you can help their bad day. And as long as everyone remembers that, it should even out in the wash.
Yeah.
It kind of sucks when you have some people that don't remember that, and then and sometimes that's good, and it's meeting the stranger in the coffee shop, and they're in a great mood, and you're in a great mood, and everybody's gonna. And sometimes it's people like you go to school and somebody's having a really crappy day, and they're mad. They don't even know why they're mad, and but it directly impacts you because they're taking their anger out on you.
Yeah.
And
Like that's a great way to like show the different anomalies that could happen because if you like because there's so much like stuff that can happen. And that's why I think small talk is important, like you were saying, because like no matter what happens, like you could just meet differences together and it won't matter like your different opinions or something because that small talk is just how's the weather today? And that's not
well, why do
offensive
you think it's called small talk?
because it doesn't have a big impact.
Exactly. It's small talk. Hey, how's the weather?
Yeah.
And one of the things that helps you do is gauge where the other person is. You can have small talk, and you can talk about, like, you know, whatever sports ball was on TV last
Yeah.
night. You know what I mean? But you can kind of gauge where someone is. If they're not very talkative and they're just kind of like, I'm fine. It's like, okay, maybe this person needs some space today. Whereas, if they're in a pretty good uplifting mood, blah, you're like, okay, I can share, I can meet this person. That's where I can meet them at today. So final thoughts. What did you take away from this conversation? What are some of the things that you feel are similar, and what are some of the big aspects that you feel like are different between your perception of social and mine?
So I feel that for some of the same aspects is that words meanings could change. They can like differentiate as time goes on. The impact of things can change. Like someone saying they have anxiety, and then someone else saying they have anxiety, and they have like different gauges. Some differentiating factors. If you talk to somebody, it's a social interaction. For you, as I've been told, tell me if I'm correct me if I'm wrong. You like go up to somebody. It has to be like face to face. You have to be like social. This is a social interaction. But if I went onto a Zoom call, this would be a social interaction. I feel like there's a difference in specialty when you get to have a social interaction. When during your time, uh, when you went over someone's house, it was special, and it's the same for me for a different reason. Like for you, it was just because wow, I get to spend time with my friend. I never get to do this. For me, it's just like, oh wow, he wants to hang with me. Um, if that's what the key differential and similar factors are. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear.
No, I think it's interesting to hear. I love your definition of a social interaction is impacting someone's day. I didn't think about it like that. Like, to me, social interaction is social. It's that, like, it's being able to see and experience someone's day with them. And I think that's the biggest difference is I love your take on the specialness of it. Like, it's completely different. Like, I was looking at it, it's like, oh, this is really special. And you're like, wow, they want to spend time with me because they don't have to. And I think that's a really cool difference of I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. So I appreciate being able to sit and like have conversations like this. I think it's the start of being able to bridge the gaps, and less arguments, more
And
conversations.
also, I love how this can like help understand. Oh, it would help. It would help me. I can't speak for you, and I hope other people watching this video, just see that how helpful it can be to understand someone's situation.
Yeah,
Like
like not coming at someone from this is why you're wrong, but from the perspective of help me understand.
yeah.
So no, I've really appreciated it.
Well, thank you for talking with me. Thank you for watching. Again, Patreon really helps. It's gonna be in the link below. And our first one, comments below. Give us another word for of the day. This one was just picked out by actually him. He did it. He picked out this one. And in some way would be equal, but I feel like I should give this to you guys. You guys are watching this. I really appreciate it. So go in the comments below. While you're there, drop a like and subscribe. Again, it really helps. Thank you. Stay happy and healthy.